It's not easy butchering people. It's hard work. You know, there's a lot more like me. We're talking to serial killers. Serial killers! New terminology. Are criminals born, or are they formed? How do we get ahead of crazy if we don't know how crazy thinks? It's easier to ask for forgiveness than for permission. Welcome to the Hollow9ine Mindhunter podcast.
All right, so we are back with the next meeting here of our behavioral sciences division of the Hollow9ine network, covering the Netflix original program Mindhunter. I am David Klone, director of the team, and joining me today, it's just the dynamic duo of myself and Mr. T.W. Brown, Special Agent on the case. We may be joined at a later time, by some other psychologically more inclined folks who have been on the show before. But for now, we will hold down the fort, just kind of like holding in tension, going on the road and doing the school. It's just the two guys in the car. So, yeah, this is
our road trip.
Yeah, this is our road. We're on the road episode. But even in this episode, they go and they have a buddy that they're working with, right? This is one of their side sort of missions where they're putting into action some of the things they've been cataloging as far as how the mind of a maniac serial killer works, and oh shit, we may have one on the line. we got a line out.
The Jethro police officer that doesn't want to believe anything's happening in his town.
Yeah, this was the come to Jesus episode for him, right? It was a little bit of development for everybody in this episode. And again, I think it's not spoilerish or out of line for at this point for us to be sort of paying attention to specialties of relationships between characters like mothers and sons. It's been such a big focus, and in this episode, one of the things that I think is crazy, it's almost all like this whole episode was almost like an X-Files Monster of the Week episode, because it really is all just on this case. Yeah, I mean, there's very little that's antecedent to this. And we see so much of it in this one sort of shot, I guess, because it's like they have that one trip out there to kind of catch everything, and it's like
we don't get a prison interview in this episode unless I'm wrong. I don't believe they have interviews. It's just this one, and I already have guns loaded for this episode, because this really is, again, I like to hold on to talking about the realistic sort of time frame and the way that it's portrayed. Because right now, if you hear that some woman is killed, some married woman is killed, who is the first suspect? Always.
Yeah, it's either a significant other, a boyfriend, a husband. Yeah, it's and yeah. I think it's not even, like you said, it's not even just now. That's a thing. Like, I kind of every once in a while, when, especially since myself being single at the moment and sort of single and looking, it's like I'm always looking, thinking, man, it would be so nice to have somebody. But then you kind of pull that shit into perspective. Like, oh, hey, by the way, make sure that whoever you start going out with doesn't have anybody in her past who might fucking murder her, because guess what? You will still be the first. Right away, they're coming to where you work, and they are putting the cuffs on you to ask you some questions, but they've already got a spot waiting for you downtown. Like, they literally are like, yep, it's him. He's going to fucking he's sleeping in jail tonight. There's no fucking way. The boyfriend / husband / significant other, not to be sort of gender exclusive. I'm just saying we're going on basic format tonight, template, guys. So please forgive pronoun misuse.
And it's the thing is that the cops don't want to believe that it's the boyfriend, fiance, whatever he's supposed to be, and you're in bumfuck Altoona, so I mean this place is not a thriving metropolis.
Very drab, drab backdrop in this episode.
Yes.
You're like,
yeah,
oh.
this is the steel town core that you're used. This is what you think of when you're going to the whole Pennsylvania idea. This is the town from All the Right Moves and everything else like that. Where Tom Cruise gets to play
Pennsylvania idea.
Yeah,
the concept of this place called Pennsylvania, and it's just going to be bombed out like Dresden. This motherfucker is a skeleton of what used to be somehow a functioning civilization.
It's just big rusty buildings made, that are going to be, and brick facades that are kind of crumbling on the corners, and then the people. I mean, you look at this group that they interact with in this episode, and you've got a bunch of backdrop characters for Napoleon Dynamite. I mean, these people are just Jethro.
Well, there are some things about it that stick out so much right away. And it really, I think this is one of the first episodes. No, well, I can't. It's almost every episode probably has a revelation moment like this. But this is one of those episodes that really hits home with you have no fucking clue who the person sitting next to you on the bus is. Because if they're from a place like this, they could be one of these fuckers who's like, well, I tricked my slow, is what they would probably have referred to him back then, brother-in-law into taking the rap for me raping and murdering his girlfriend because she was tired of dating him, because I guess she was pity dating him. And there's also the mild-manneredness of that quote-unquote slow brother-in-law, the what was his name, Barry?
Yeah, I think so.
He, buying the donuts, knowing that the cops are coming over. There's an element where you want to believe that that's coming from a place of naive innocence. That, hey, listen, fuck it. They were coming to my place. I take pride in being polite and having good etiquette. It throws shade on, okay, so does everybody who knows the actual rules of etiquette when you have company coming over? Like, does that automatically mean, all right, wait, the fucker had donuts waiting for you? Cops coming over, donuts? He was hiding something. You just arrest that guy right fucking now. There's a certain level where I'm like, oh, man, I think in some people's minds, there's no reason that would be suspect, and it's very possible from seeing the way this guy carried himself that he could be one of those people is how I read his character, and I think maybe that's how we're supposed to read him. I don't know.
The moment he started crying like that in that opening interview, I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's dirty, man.
Well,
this
you intention
so dirty.
So you're the tension. I'm the holding, going, maybe he was really upset.
I'm sitting there going, I'm like, this guy is so dirty. It's interesting because I've had a lot of interaction the last several weeks with guys who have done time. I know it's not out your way, but there's a brand out here called Dave's Killer Bread. It was actually created by a guy who did a grip of time here in Oregon, and then got out, created his own bread line.
For murder? Because if he was in jail for murder and he's making killer bread, it's like, dude, you are owning that shit to the bank, and that is so badass. That is applause for real.
His company for like $36 million or something like that not too long ago.
Shit! Nice, dude. Oh, man,
but
applause.
he made it a policy to to employ guys who were getting out and that kind of thing. He's got a podcast now. In fact, I was a guest not too long ago on where, he's talking to guys who have done time, come out and are making their own mark, with their own businesses and stuff. And he's trying to show the society as a whole that these are not throwaway citizens, right?
Right.
And so talking to a lot of these guys, we kind of get into these conversations and this show comes up and we were all the same when it came to that guy and his crying. The first thing we all said was, he did it.
Guilty as fuck. Oh, my God.
He did it, man. That crying was so fake. He did it. I mean, but that's the jaded, sort of incarcerated viewpoint, I mean, you just look at that guy and go, guilty. Guilty. Whereas the more compassionate people, the less jaded people, the people that haven't seen folks run the system are looking at him going, the poor guy.
Well, I mean, I just you know what part of it for me is he reminds me, that character reminds me of people that I've known in my life who were older than me. You know, like there was this one substitute in the school system that I grew up in who, I mean, thinking back on it, you know, I can't say that I wasn't guilty of participating in the sort of torture that guy was put through at times. I think after a certain point I stopped. You know, I definitely know when I would see him out in public, not in the school settings, it was always very cordial, and there was like I was actually very like respectful of my elders and whatnot. But I mean, This guy could not get a room to calm down or to respect him. If when you found out he was the substitute teacher for your class, you were like, oh, fuck that, man, let's read comic books, or, you know, like, that's it, we're gonna play cards in the back of the room. It was sort of like, I remember vividly this time where he basically was kind of trying to hide that he was starting to cry, you know. Now this guy, he also he worked at this. Fuck anyone who grew up with me who listens to this. Hopefully there's some of you guys out there. They know probably exactly who I'm talking about. I'm not going to use his name, but he worked at one of the convenience stores downtown as well. And I remember I came in over the summer with a couple friends, and because it was more than one of us, if it was just me, we probably would have said hi to each other, everything would have been fine. But because it was more than one of us, he like saw us coming in and tried to make a beeline down one of the aisles to get to the back of the store so that we didn't see him, and he almost knocked over a display of shit, you know, like an end cap of like suntan lotion or some shit. And I just remember watching this episode, seeing that guy, going, fuck, he reminds me of him so much. And now to think like, well, holy fuck, maybe that guy had a freezer full of heads. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that guy was cutting off appendages as fucking trophies. Who the fuck knows? But, you know, I guess to even tie it to some of the other conversations going on today about bullying and about how it's leading to maybe this violence in schools. I mean, all of these people that you're hoping are able to take it. I think maybe that's one of the things that goes on out there, is that they just think that you're going to be able to take it. Like, and I think that's sort of personified in this guy's brother-in-law's character, you know, like, fucking man up, dude, you could take this. And there are people who can't, you know, but it's amazing because of how frail they look. You would never think they could do some of this sick shit. Like, this guy obviously couldn't do things to a living body, but he was able to mutilate a corpse. He was able to do shit after it was dead. Yeah, that's a level of crazy and sick that it's like, oh shit, you know what I mean? And I might have contributed to somebody who could be like that, or I have to assume is like that because of how similar he is to this character. Like, what the mind blown.
That was the funny thing, is as soon as I saw Frank, you know, the cohort in this whole thing, you know, Mr. Man Up. The gigolo of the crew,
the mastermind, really.
All I could think of was this is where the Napoleon Dynamite came in, because all I could think of was, oh my God, it's Cousin Rico.
Holy shit! See, I did not even think that, and now I'm not going to be able to watch this episode the same ever again. I'm glad I watched it twice today before we start, because I also really feel for the officer, the people, I forget what his. Dude, I'm terrible. Yeah. I should have had a website open for this. Hey, send us in some email, for God's sake, at mindhunter@hollow9.com. Or you can hit us up at hollow9podcast@gmail.com, or info@hollow9.com. Attention, Mindhunter. And tell me who the fuck, like, the names that I missed up. Like, guys, you know, every once in a while we get tired here at the Behavioral Sciences Division of the Hollow9 Network. You have
so many cases, so little time.
Any idea the shit we go through behind the scenes? Like, you know, a podcast network may appear simple to take care of from the outside, but I assure you, it's like, you know, we're trying to figure out who's getting what office in the basement while we're on the road interviewing people who definitely need to be brought to justice, you know, including people's moms. Again, always including people's moms. This for me was one of those episodes that, you know, when I watched it, I thought, you know, it was almost the police show formula, the way this episode sort of played out. I mean, it was almost like this was, if they decided to go network, you know, the commercial network, and make it, you know, Mindhunter the series,
this would be the week-to-week stuff we would see with an underlying case underneath it. Like you were saying, the X-Files monster episode. I mean, this is what we would be seeing, you know, because they take this one and they really jump into this. And it's fun to watch sort of the dynamic shifting back and forth, and the side conversations that happen away from the case. The conversation he has with Carr when they're walking through the parking lot. The one he has with his girlfriend in the apartment when she's talking about when he starts, you know, basically bagging on the guy for being a big crybaby, you know, and she sort of starts talking about some of the things she did, you know, in the past and everything. And he's like, yeah, okay, well, you know, women crying for men is one thing, but men crying to men, come on.
Again, you know? With her showing signs always in my mind of like, how are we not supposed to start thinking shit? You know, she is a little too in the minds of these guys too. Like, just from hearing it secondhand through Holden, there's a crazy theory about her. I almost don't know if I should mention it now. I mean, we've mentioned already this is a spoiler-filled podcast. It assumes that you've watched the whole season, or at least up to the episode we're doing now, and that we're going to unapologetically drop things that we know or don't know.
And speculation is always just speculation.
This episode, we kind of, it's hard to, you know, because, like, there's so many different facets of this show that it's like, okay, do we do it scene by scene, or do we jump in and do themes? I always actually kind of like doing themes and seeing how it goes, but those opens that we keep getting hinting at, oh my God, you know, while these guys are developing this whole system for identifying these types of criminals, these mass murderers and serial killers, here's one we're watching develop on his own, and we're watching his evolution. And so we have this open, I mean, we have revealed that this is the BTK killer, right? We have spoken about that before.
Which, by the way, I just want to interrupt you so don't lose your train of thought.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
But I've actually grabbed a couple of books on BTK this last week, and so I'm actually going to study up on that over the next week, because I'm not an Ann Rule kind of guy. You know, I lived with these people. I don't like reading about them. So, you know, but this is one that for this, it got me curious. And so I've actually grabbed some stuff because, you know, Chris has always got the info on that. And so on nights when CJ's not here, you know, maybe I have a nugget that will sort of feed the fire, so to speak.
Well, I mean, there is so much about the fact that that's who it is that I think is part of what makes this show as amazing as what I hope it continues to be in season 2. The scope that they're talking about here, and because he was caught during my sort of aware lifetime, I was a very young child when Ted Bundy was caught and executed, and I remember seeing pieces of his interviews, but like the final day interviews before he was executed, on Good Morning America or whatever the hell we had on the TV when I was eating cereal before school, and he seemed like such a nice looking person that my child mind had no idea what kind of a person he actually was.
Right.
Or why is he even on TV? Like there's that point in your mind too, where you don't really kind of get like what TV and movies are and why certain people get to be on it or in them, and so kind of thinking about it in those terms and thinking about the idea that the BTK killer was caught so recently and that this is taking place so long ago, and that we seeing him at the same time that these guys are figuring out the way they're going to be able to recognize these people. This guy is like out there doing the shit, and he's not only doing it, but he's one of the ones that like taunts the police, right? Because he's one who is obviously in this episode that we see him dropping off a letter in a mailbox, wearing gloves. You know what I mean? Like all that shit where you're just like, oh my God, dude, people but below a certain age, a certain generation right now won't even understand what the point of that shit was, because they will only exist in a world of email and text messaging, and like won't understand the importance or even just the phenomenon of physical mail, snail mail as they call it.
They drive past payphones and wonder what those are for. So
right now, the ones I see are all just people living in them.
And that's something that I've started looking at now, is what's behind the scene when he does things. Like when he drops off those letters, I was looking at the logos on the buildings.
Yeah, and I saw the clock, and the clock that's changing between the time and the temperature. It's 7:30, and it's
7:34, yeah,
and it's 32 degrees outside, so it's winter. So him wearing the gloves would make sense, you know what I mean? Like, and how he's doing all the shit that we eventually in 2005 found out that he had been doing, like the reason he's called BTK. You're just like, fuck, man, like this shit's going on, and he's walking right past people on the street. You know what I mean? He's got a wife and kids. You know, there's like a lot about this, and the irony of the fact that he's doing this while they're beginning to be able to catch people like this. You know, it's kind of a testament to his sort of, I guess, if you want to call it this, skill level. if he's a character you're going to pick in a video game, this is one of his skills. They will basically not catch you for 2 decades. You know, like your reign of terror is going to go a long time.
You have 20 years to kill at will.
And then another 10 to lay low that they won't find you. And then when they do find you, though, it's going to go all the way. But I don't think he got life in prison. He didn't get the death penalty, or did he get the death penalty?
Don't know if I think didn't they? I thought they executed Bundy. See that?
Well, Bundy they did, but I don't know about.
BTK.
Yeah.
No, I think BTK is still sitting.
I am going to go to the Google machine. But anyway, like that was a very long rant on the 5-second opening shot of this movie.
That's what shows. That's how important that little nugget that we get in the beginning starts to become. I mean, it really. I wait for the credits. I'm like, come on, credits, hurry up. I want to skip the button, but you made me feel guilty about that, so I'm, letting the credits play through on the replays, because I'm one of those people guilty of, doing the skip intro thing. But now I sit and I watch through the. I
never do skip intro. I'm a big watching the whole thing guy, like a completist in that way, especially with a show that we were talking about before we got on the air here, but with Glitch. That was one of the first ones when I noticed that skip intro shit started. I was rewatching Glitch for like the second time. It was when the second season had finally been dropped on Netflix. And I was like, no, fuck you. Like, first of all, the intro is not that long, and second of all, how it's like you're supposed to get a breath between episodes. In my mind, that's also why the watch credits. Like, some of these shows had cut scenes after credits that, like, when the thing would automatically jump to the next episode. You're gonna miss that. Now, I always get pissed that you have to sit through the multilingual fucking FBI notices or whatever the hell at the end, but I kind of just fast forward through those or jump to the next episode as that happens.
Yeah, but if you're gonna skip through the credits of Friends, that's one thing. But skipping through the credits of something like this, you don't know if you're gonna miss something. And so now I am more cognizant of what could maybe pop up or what sort of clues could happen. Because this is one of the things that the people that are producing those, and this show has now is part of that wave, I think, is they can slide little things into those moments that really sort of tie into what you're about to see.
And especially, like, if you don't think of Fight Club every time you see the actor who plays Tench come on screen, and you don't think of the fact that David Fincher, the most meticulous filmmaker alive, did Fight Club, and Fight Club is very famous for having these sort of flash single frame, almost subliminal message level editing going on. That's what that whole open feels like to me. Like, and it's almost maybe to also just not hit you over the head too much with the brutality and horror of what some of these cases are, because I think that's something that this show is really portraying well, as sort of the level of preparedness mentally and emotionally some of these police departments were not at for being able to deal with these types of killers, these types of minds anyway, these types of criminals that think this way.
You mentioned that, and that as a perfect moment is when they were after they left Benji, after they left his house after that first interview. After they leave Benji's house and they're in the car, and the cops talking about, how, well, we just wanted to let him know that you're coming, and it's because it's only polite. And he goes, well, and they're talking about to go see his mom, and sarcastically, Tench goes, should we call her first? And the cop just like completely deadpan serious goes, well, it would be the right thing to do.
Yeah,
and
I think it would be polite. God. Yeah, I think it'd be polite. You're like, Jesus, dude, I was fucking kidding. Yeah, Are you serious?
That is that almost that naive mindset, because again, this sort of brutality wasn't on television every single day like it is for us now. Every day you're watching some sort of terrible, terrible death being played out on the smile.
Yeah, sorry, dude.
Being played out, and we're almost numb to it. Whereas back then, this is just unimaginable. You know, I mean, and it certainly couldn't be somebody that you went to school with.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, and that is what is hitting home for me so much about the substitute guy. You know what I mean? That you're like, fuck, there are also people who were in my class that I'm like, shit. Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, remember my my episode 4 drop was the guy that walked into the grocery store carrying his mother's head in his hand on Mother's Day.
That's, yeah. I mean, there was also, wasn't there a guy who beheaded somebody on a bus a couple years ago that was sort of on that level of like, everything was going fine. All of a sudden he turned to the guy sitting next to him who was asleep listening to his iPod, started stabbing him, stabbed him 27 times, and then cut his head off and walked around the bus carrying the head. Like, now at that point, the bus driver had already pulled over and everybody else jumped off, but they had him locked on that bus till cops showed up, and he was just holding the head up to people through the windows.
But when you're in a town of 3,000 people, because when you drive into Estacada, you see the sign, population 3,078 or whatever the hell it is. The last thing you're ever going to expect on Mother's Day, Sunday, is for some dude to come walking into the local small town grocery store carrying his mom's head. And that sort of mindset almost exists in this town, but not to the level that you see on Mindhunter, when even the cops just can't believe somebody's doing this. I mean, the idea that it could be somebody they know is just not fathomable. And this is the thing that I think Mindhunter really starts to bring out is this is, again, where I jump on my history bandwagon and say this shows where we were then versus where we are now, where everything is a split second with a screen crawl and catchy music and a label that gets splashed on your screen, and it's a daily event.
On top of that, there's also some kind of sponsorship usually somewhere snuck in there too. So it's like, as you're being shown this horrible shit, this screen crawl was provided by Tylenol, which you're going to need to take after this shit is over. Of course, I hope by dropping Tylenol in this context that they won't sort of immediately not consider ever sponsoring us. But I'm just saying, we're using you as an example because you're so well known, and you're a brand that, I mean, do I have to say Bayer aspirin? Maybe we go that route. I'll say, hey, you help us avoid heart attacks, and you help me prove points on podcasts. Bayer aspirin, Hollow9ine Network. Think about it, guys. Think about it.
Pretty soon we're going to become like Wayne's World. Little, yellow, different.
We will not bow down to corporate sponsors dressed head to toe in Fila. You know what I mean? Like, that's just crazy, man. But if Netflix wanted to throw us some sweet sponsorship money for praising the shit out of their show, because, I mean, one of the things about this show, when I describe it, I often say it's Seven plus Zodiac plus Silence of the Lambs. The sort of, these are the high art, high craftsmanship type films about brutal, what are usually before this time, before the times of Silence of the Lambs, before the times of Seven. Mostly we're landing in the horror sort of slasher movie, splatter movie realm. You didn't see a lot of serial killer where there's not so much violence as there is talking about violence and maybe making you imagine the violence more than you actually seeing the violence, which is a tried and true, methodology to almost make the relationship between people watching this and the people making it more intimate than if they were being gratuitous and showing you stuff that you would then not be able to unsee.
Yeah, it does. There's something to be said about the sort of Hitchcockian way of alluding to without, and letting your mind be the theater, Because pretty much nowadays, I think our heads could come up with stuff far worse than anybody can put on screen.
Well, I mean, it's part of the reason, too, like, when you think back to, I always think back growing up, one of the sort of big trust issue areas I had relationship-wise is because the first girlfriend I ever had in high school was a heavy drug user and would constantly try to tell me not to worry or that she wasn't doing drugs, but then whenever she was with friends, not with me, she was doing drugs, you know, and nothing that I think was anything like IV drugs. It wasn't heroin or anything like that where I was like, oh, fuck, do I have to get blood tested now? It was more just like, you know, smoking pot way before I was an advocate for its use medicinally. And then, like, doing things like snorting Adderall and taking acid and eating mushrooms back before I ever tried mushrooms. You know, definitely there's the pre-experimental person who has no idea, you know, how preachy it is to be so against people smoking pot and whatnot. But maybe as teenagers that we shouldn't be. I don't know. But, you know, it's a far other thing at that time to also be like, wait, so you're crushing pills and snorting them? Like, you just told me you were going to the bathroom. Like, so I developed a seriously hardcore trust issue from stuff like that. And, you know, a show like this making you suddenly question more so about people that you may have grown up with that kind of are exhibiting things that now this is exploring from that certain type of, you know what I mean? Like that's what having your mind being the theater does. It puts it in this like, holy fuck, now I understand those memes that say you walk past 4 serial killers in your lifetime. You know what I mean? Like literally on a street somewhere, you walk past a guy who's a serial killer.
Well, it's you know, and I would save this for episode 6, but you know, I'm gonna. It's kind of the now thing, and we already talked about it earlier, and we've talked about it before. But that's the funny thing about when I get together with some of my friends that are on the outside now, and we'll be in a restaurant having dinner with our wives, and there'll be 5 or 6 of us at a table, you know, and we're sitting at this table, you know, surrounded by all these, quote, normal people. Mm-hmm. And then we'll look over at another table and see another dude we know.
with his new family that don't know about his history, that you guys like, he's like giving you the sign like.
It's the thing is, you know, you don't know who you're walking past. You don't know who you're sitting next to on the bus. I mean, in this episode, who do they break down in the interrogation room? Who gives them all their information? It's the woman, and she's part of it.
Yeah. The sister, isn't
that Frank's wife?
It's Frank's wife, but it's Benji's sister, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah. So she's in the middle of all that. You know, I mean, she's the one that they have go get the cleaning supplies. You know, I mean,
and she forgot him at first, and then she got there, and she's the one who's sort of now. It's something that will be dealt with next episode, but when it happened in this episode, I felt like I had something a little bit in common with Dr. Carr. Next episode, it's the way she described what she saw. I kind of picked up on the word splashing being a little awkward and odd and sort of sticking out like a sore thumb kind of situation there. So, you know, that's definitely, though, something that gets explored much later. Or not much later, but much more depth next episode.
I thought one of the things they did really well in this episode is coming back to the scene of the crime with the cop and doing the walkthrough of the house and having that camera, you know, show the stain down the wall.
Yeah.
When he's holding the knife in his hand. And it's now coming down on his shoulders that, yes, this happened in your backyard with your friends, people you knew. Yeah. You know, and he's having to look around and there's the bathtub, you know, there's the bathroom and all this stuff. And it's like this massive cosmic gut punch that this cop has to take as he has to realize that the whole world he just knew evaporated.
Yeah. The light bulb didn't just go off. It went off and shattered over his head and rained glass down on him for a few minutes.
You know, and I thought that this was one of those things where cinemagraphically they handled it so well when they do that walkthrough scene. You know, I thought that walkthrough scene really sort of brought the gravity because, you know, the light's so dim, it's so dark, you know, and it's this guy's end of his innocence. You know, he's a cop and his life it's going to go downhill from here. He's going to start drinking tonight.
It's interesting that you say the end of his innocence, too, because that's a big deal they make with Benji during his interview when they're saying, did you have sex with her? And he's like, well, she was my first sexual experience. And then it's sort of kind of doesn't necessarily add up later, and he kind of again seems a little on the too frail side, that you're almost like, wait a minute, really, dude, did you ever even have sex? And it's almost like the same way that Holden doesn't seem like he should be able to be getting the chick that he's got right now. Like, there's no reason a girl like Debbie should be with Holden, but he's doing it. So, maybe there is a possibility that this Benji guy had someone who's not only willing to move in with him, but willing to marry him. We kind of find out during Frake's interview that he goes, no, Benji thinks they were engaged. You know what I mean? Like,
that was the thing for me, is as I was watching this, the one thing I started thinking is, this guy's created this fiction in his head, and it's almost a precursor to like things like the Dorothy Stratton story. I mean, this is, he's created something that isn't real at all, and once the reality hits him, he just has no other way to deal other than, oh, she's got to go.
And it's scary because so much of the world that we all have to sort of share together is based on, a lot of the time, us agreeing on what is real and what isn't, and what, and that's why it's sort of an interesting time in terms of things like all the conspiracy theories that are out there, the fact that we have we have two very vocal parties of people arguing over whether or not the earth is actually round. You know what I mean? There's a lot of weird dissonance, and when you think of the fact that something like somebody having a kind of obsessive view of somebody else, where they kind of almost imagine a whole relationship with them that isn't really going on. I mean, that's something that's very typical of a lot of villainous characters all throughout the history of cinema and TV. And it always is usually surrounding a guy wanting a woman who doesn't want him back. Which is another fucking interesting thing we have now with these fucking incels and shit going on in reality now. It seems like it has roots all the way back in this.
It's one of those things. I mean, think about the history of when we're watching television now, and you think about some of the stuff you watch on regular network television that you can't imagine being shown just as recent as 10 years ago, much less 30 or 40. This world is from that time, when, I mean, this is an era where we have just come out of things like Vietnam and Watergate, and we're trying to recenter ourselves, and the hippies are kind of spreading out into the real world now, and you've got two polar opposites that are just sitting there waiting to try and shape the next decade and a half. You've got the straight-laced military cut and the hippie flower child, and that's really what the culture was broken into back then. And it's just, you see that now, and you can't imagine, things like Jackson and places where the race riots went on. Yet we've got protests happening in cities weekly.
Yeah.
So why is it so hard to believe? But it's only hard to believe until you've experienced it.
Yeah.
And so many people, when you watch it on television, it's not real.
Yeah. Well, especially this, where it's a period piece, like it's so hard for anyone who wasn't, I wasn't around for the 70s. I was born in 79, but I feel like the times I remember of my early life in the 80s and looking back through family photo albums and shit, I get that this time period was real and happened, I mean, I existed in a pre-internet world, so I know what it was like to, not have access to the kind of information that these guys are the first ones sort of collating and putting together. And to think that part of that process involved them getting in cars and getting on planes and actually physically going to different places, talking to different people, teaching classes, taking notes, bringing that shit back, writing it all down again. You know, it's like, holy fuck. You know, there's a moment where you're like, all right, I do kind of get why we were so quick to embrace this thing called the internet, because holy shit, just think about cutting that whole process down into, yep, I found the shit and emailed it off. I didn't have to get out of my chair. They didn't have to get out of their chair, you know, but we also didn't take into account that would bring into things like security cameras. Like, hey, do you have a security system in your house? Well, you know, if this house that Benji was living in with his girlfriend, fiance, wasn't it Betty Jean? It was something like, her name was something like that, like Bobby Jean.
Yeah, it's Betty Jean, I'm pretty sure.
If they had a security system in the house, well, maybe there would have been video record of what actually went down, and it wouldn't even be up to how do we get one of these people to crack and tell us what the fuck really happened, because you could see the two versions. Like, so you're saying, Benji has the right of way. Okay, he's lying, but he's fragile and probably didn't really know 100% what was going on or how many crimes he was committing. Frank definitely was driving the bus. And then this chick, well, we don't know. She's a little weirded out when they go to the house. She's got the crying baby that they just put to sleep right when the guys decided to come and interview her. So there's a lot of factors that were kind of putting pressure on the way they were trying to interview her. And it wasn't until after they left that she had to think about it, and then decides to come to the police station and, all right, let me revise a few details of my story. You know what I mean? Like, let me Richard Kimball this for you.
Well, and that's the other thing is hard. It's hard to, and I think this is one of the things that it shows is, unless you're in that serial killer mindset, which is what they're trying to discover, keeping those details straight is just not a natural thing. And they're cluing in. And even we go to episode 6 before the splashing becomes, relevant. That statement, I didn't pay attention to it in episode 5, but I sure as hell did when Carr brings it up in episode 6. Right. And it's that sort of thing that they're paying attention to. If you're not a sociopath, if you're not that person that they're looking for, the serial killer, things get so muddled and you can't keep your facts straight, and that's how they're going to get you. And that's the difference between that little group in Altoona versus what they're really trying to look for.
Yeah.
I mean, they have earmarks of the type of brutal killer, but serial killer, not so much.
Yeah. And it's also that these are the people that in these side missions that they're catching, like the guy that they caught in episode 3, who was killing the old women. That was like on the second time that he assaulted somebody, he murdered them. These are the people that they're catching before they have a chance to get to spree level killer Ed Kempers, who killed 17, or 32, however many people he killed. They called him the co-ed killer. I think he killed like 32 people. And he, like the person who came into the store in your town carrying a head under their arm, he was walking around with heads in duffel bags and shit. You know what I mean? The people that they're catching in these side missions are the ones that are sort of just coming out of their shell. They're like, yeah, this is murder 1 for me. Now Frank, being the driver of the bus in this, is just supposed to be a product of a rough childhood, rough life, rough upbringing, rough history of being already kind of in the system. But at the same time, he's a different kind of, he's more of like the con man, grifter, murderer of opportunity if needs be kind of guy. He's not someone who's secretly humiliating his mother by murdering people and fucking corpses. It's
he's evil cousin Rico. That's what he is.
Yeah,
I mean, his abuse just gets a little overblown finally, and goes goes dark. Versus just the backhand or whatever that maybe he was administering before, and now it's become something different, and it's because maybe he felt like his manhood was disrespected or whatever his reasoning. But he could have gone down that line. You know, you remember the guy that they talked to, the one that wanted Big Red, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, he was sort of a serial killer, but really he was more of just a sociopath that hated women and just wanted them to shut up. You know, I mean, that was his thing. He kept saying that. I just wanted her to shut up, you know, and so yeah, he kills him, you know. But he didn't quite fit the mold they were really trying to establish here, you know.
Yeah,
he had hints of it, but he really wasn't the mold they were looking for.
He's the Arrested Development high school bully, you know. Should have been captain of the football team if he didn't drop out because he just didn't want to do his work. Who then got into either doing construction or landscaping, something with his hands, something where he's getting money off the books, and he's sort of lived that sort of on the fringe life. He's not, you know, Ed Kemper, who was living with his mom and just snapped. You know, he's not the Nightingale killer. He's not Charles Manson. There's a level of... like the only word I can actually think of to use, there's a level of sophistication that those minds have that his doesn't. His is much more like, oh shit, there's somebody passed out that I can fuck on the floor right now, and the only person who's witnessing it is my slow brother-in-law. Fuck this, I'm doing it, and then I'll tell everybody what the fuck the story was. You know, it's not like this intricate, like, and then I'll cut the body up and leave it in enough garbage cans separated by enough miles that if you looked at it from a map, it makes a smiley face. Like there's no real evil. Like his mind is not what they're hunting. Not the kind of shit, but he is the level of brutality of the crime that is what pulls it into their radar. I think is what makes this officer pull them in.
He's got damage, but he's not the evil genius.
Right.
You know, he would only have been one of the henchmen.
We drop a lot of Netflix show titles into random conversation over here at the Hollow9ine Network. I hope it's being noticed out there. And if it's not, we'll stop and point it out every once in a while, because you can only talk about people who are getting away with amputating the breasts of a corpse for so long without having to come up for air and calm down. You know, this as we don't want to be the next subjects of our own behavioral studies investigation, because God knows being so immersed in this world could have its consequences. God, you know, maybe that's where the show's going. I don't even know.
Could you do everybody a favor and lift that dust ruffle up around the bottom of your bed so we know there's not a body under there?
Oh
Dave?
Shit! See, there you go. Now this seed gets planted, and the next thing you know, the director of the FBI is getting pissed off. And he's
knocks on your door,
putting them in the basement and making them study my fucking text messages.
Why are you so fascinated with Mindhunter there, Mr. Klone?
Obviously has nothing to do with running a podcast network that talks about shit like this exactly, and wanting to kiss Netflix's ass has nothing to do with either of those two things. That's one of the funniest things too about, you know, filling out like business paperwork, you know, for a podcast network, when it's like, you know, purpose of business, and you're like, shit, how do I describe this? I want to make a Rolling Stone that deals in audio files instead of magazine pages, you know.
I am a video entertainment dissector.
Exactly. But yeah, and it's like, but we rely on other people's artwork to be able to sit around and critique an op-ed.
We're just taking Chris Hardwick's stuff to the next level.
Yeah, you know, intelligent. Well-reasoned, you know. Where you know what? We're those people that you hear talking around the water cooler that you're like, fuck, I wish I was friends with them so I could join that conversation, because I actually watched that episode twice, and I was really confused about this one thing, like when the plane fell out of the tree, did Boone actually die, or was the island really talking to Locke? And it's like, these guys seem like they know.
We're just performing a service.
Yes, exactly. Biting the bullet so you don't have to. So yeah, the big, you know, and I love too, one of the things that's signature about this show instead of it being necessarily a cliffhanger, it's like, you know, the episode ends because some hit song from that year is about to come full volume as they cut to black and start rolling credits. And it was like the last thing they ask the sister is, before we end the episode, Sopranos style, it was who killed her, because she said that she got there and saw the body, and that the body was already dead when she got there. And they just wanted her to confirm which one of these dudes did it. And she just goes, I don't know. Cut to black. Song comes up. Why do I hate Mondays? I think that's the one that was in that episode.
I think so.
And definitely this show has put me on a huge kick of going back and listening to a lot of 70s classics, especially Exile. Oh, my God. And actually, you know, there's even some Billy Ocean in there. There's a lot of stuff in the background that really also completes the world. And
my weekends are full of my Spotify 70s playlist. Nice. I have to confirm that.
Is it from Mindhunter? Is that what brought it back on, or just
actually no? You know, I just when the wife and I are doing stuff around here, we like to have music that we can both sort of jive on, and so we both really relate to the same stuff of the 70s. In the 80s, we sort of branch in different directions, but in the 70s, we can mostly agree.
Nice.
So, the weekends, it's mostly 70s, kind of cranked throughout the house.
That's cool.
So yeah, that's the cool thing at the end of Mindhunter is you go, oh, I got to add that song to my playlist.
Yep. Or like if you're like me, that you're kind of like, all right, I know I've heard this before, but I don't exactly know what it is. I'm going to quickly get my phone out and Shazam this real quick and find out what I'm going to download later. And my playlist on my iPod Touch, which I still use, is continually growing.
They're using the actual cuts, whereas a lot of other shows are using like new versions.
Yeah, or somebody remaking it, or someone covering it. You know,
see that a lot in *Handmaid's Tale*. Is they take these really cool songs and they're being redone by people that I don't know. So
I can't watch that show. I can't bring myself to try. I'm already so furious about the dystopia our world is becoming that I've been told by colleagues on this network and others. Like the Fangirl Zone, which you should check out if you're not. And they said, yeah, Klone, you will be losing your goddamn mind. Every minute of this episode, each episode, you'd probably be like, I am breaking stuff. I can't do this. I'm getting into fights with my family. This show's just putting me too far over the edge. Some shows get frustrating like that. As far as I can tell, Mindhunter, because of the sort of pacing and the way that this show unfolds, I don't feel that, but then there are definitely other shows where I'm like, oh god. Like, god damn.
Mindhunter is just very well done. It's just very intelligent.
Yeah.
And it really does stick to the material and to the era. I mean, I can tell you as I watch it for, clues to the time frame that they're in, and I want to know that they're still, I don't want to see somebody holding a digital watch, Right. I mean, I'm really sort of stuck on the background, and my brain sort of jets back to that era, and I try to make my brain remember the way I felt and the things that I thought during that time. Because this is right where I'm sort of, this is where I was coming into my own. This is where I was just getting ready to be, 11, 12, 13, and starting to get my own mind,
Yeah.
So I became more aware of my surroundings, and so it's nice to watch this and see it adhere to that era.
And the fact that BTK gives us a window that could go all the way up into the 2000s, if that's what they're trying to see. To me, that's what they're telegraphing with something like that. Is like, oh, by the way, we're going to highlight the fact that why would we do this if it's not going to be that he eventually is somebody that they catch because of the techniques that are developed through this program in their behavioral sciences division. So, I'm waiting for the times where I'll get those same moments of nostalgia. And, I'm already thinking, because there's other shows on Netflix, like if you haven't watched White Gold, I definitely suggest that one, but it's by the same creator as The In-Betweeners. So if you've never seen The In-Betweeners, which is another UK show, watch that shit first. It's only 6 episodes a season, 3 seasons, and I think it's only 22 to 25 minutes an episode. Watch that to get down with their style and humor, and then watch White Gold, which is set in the 80s, and they use so much 80s music it is a nostalgia head trip, just like Glow. You know what I mean? Just like the Glow original show on Netflix, where you're just like, "Fuck, I'm downloading this song too." Oh my god, you know, I'm buying a lot of shit on iTunes lately, and it's all because these shows are really like, now I feel like the era I grew up in is the prime zone. You know, maybe like in the 80s and 90s, a lot of stuff was being set in the 60s and 70s to kind of
that
go
was called
period.
Yeah, there were shows on the radio back then when I was, in the 80s, that was based off of the movie The Big Chill. So people were coming up with the Big Chill hour. So they were playing a lot of that 60s era music. Whereas now you can't find 60s stations.
Yeah.
Whereas, they used to be a dime a dozen. Now classic is considered the 80s.
Yeah, like it's aged up, right? Like the window has shifted. And so now the 80s, there's like a prime area for people to be setting movies and shows, because it's also, I think it's ripe for all the sight gags that we were actually just describing that we're not looking forward to on this show. Like, I don't want to see them on cell phones, because so much of this is because they don't have that shit. You know what I mean? Like, when, but at the same time, I'm starting to think like, okay, what are the hits they're going to use to really kind of, let us know, okay, we're in the 80s now. We're definitely going to hear some, what's her name, Debbie Harry doing Rush Rush from Scarface. We're gonna hear some Madonna, maybe a bunch of different Madonna. Maybe that will be
Simple Minds, Don't You Forget About Me is going to have to come into play at some point.
And it depends too on what Holden's relationship status is and how much we jump, if they do time jumps, because there's a certain theory out there, I guess, since we're going long on this one, and we were hinting at some things where if this is BTK, the sort of way that Debbie is being portrayed on this show, she seems to exhibit some of the sort of workings of the minds of the people that they've been hunting here. And there is a theory out there that she is the daughter of BTK, but I don't know time-wise if that actually makes sense now that I say it, because her and Holden's relationship is going concurrently with all the BTK stuff, and I don't know if he had a college-age daughter at that time, but
I think so.
It would
not in the 70s.
It would definitely be interesting to find out that she is the daughter of a famous serial killer. Like maybe she's Zodiac's daughter, or she is the Zodiac, something like that. That might be something that they do. And being that Fincher did the Zodiac movie, it would be interesting that maybe Mindhunter becomes like their central universe that all these other shows and movies are then now branches off of. Like the way Stephen King's Dark Tower universe became sort of his sort of main thing. It's the way Tangent City is for us. There's going to be a lot of stories that branch out of Tangent City, but it all starts with establishing this huge universe where all these things could coexist. I don't know. I just think I like the idea more and mostly that Debbie is going to turn out to be a serial killer if she's not already. Like, there's something too cold and calculating about her at times for it to not really eventually be paying off and leading in that direction, in my mind.
Maybe she becomes the evil genius.
Or maybe it's from interacting with Holden. Who knows? Like maybe having been this intimate with a person like him who is being not only obsessive but also affected by the people that he's studying to this degree, and she's sort of in a similar field psychologically, and she actually even has competing theories with his. It'd be interesting that if the maybe sort of way that their relationship were to either end or evolve might push her into acting on that knowledge, and or acting on those impulses that at least I feel like I'm seeing in her. I'm like, dude, this chick is gonna kill somebody. If not Holden. Who knows? Hopefully not Holden.
We can only wait and hope.
I don't know. If only CJ were here and he could tell us how the book this is based on ends, and we could say, all right, spoiler alert, that he lives. I mean, he had to, at least had to live long enough to write a book, so we'll see what the hell that actually amounts to. This has been a very long look at episode 5. I'm sure there's things we missed, so we've dropped a few ways you can get in touch with us throughout the episode. Hopefully you caught those. If not, there will be business after we're done here. But until then, why don't you tell us, Mr. TW, some things about what's going on in your world? Where can people find you in Internetica? What can they look forward to? Is it the 20th book of the month? How many books have you put out so far since the last time we recorded a Mindhunter episode?
Actually, because my audio schedule has gotten so crazy, I've sort of taken a break. I'm going to get back into the writing on Monday. Took a break for a couple of personal reasons just to sort of clear my head. Plus, like I said, I had a backlog in the audio world, so I had to put all my focus on getting caught up on that. I got signed on 5 different projects within 3 days, and it was like,
holy shit.
Okay. So I had to get to work.
It's good to be in demand, my friend. Good to be in demand.
It's better than being unemployed.
Yeah.
So, awesome. But yeah, you can find me on Amazon. I mean, it's mostly the zombie stuff, but I've got a horror comedy out there as well, and I'm starting to catalog and work my way up to writing a book about my Newfoundlands, and this is the time of year I'm actually really busy with them, with water work, draft cart work. So it keeps me hopping. Plus my bees.
Wow, man. We gotta get some Hollow9ine honey going on here. I want some honey.
Yeah. I'm gonna have a jar for you, man.
Awesome, dude. Awesome. Maybe we'll auction that off on our potathon in July or something. Maybe we'll have a pint of honey that we could auction off. That'd be great. Well, all right.
One for you and one for the masses.
Oh my God. All right, guys. You heard it here first on the Mindhunter podcast. We're gonna have some really awesome stuff for you guys to look forward to in July. Whenever you're listening to this, that'll be July of 2018. Folks in the future, we're sorry. Hopefully the world is still here and that there's even more honey at that time and that you can find it on some kind of Hollow9ine branded store on the internet or whatever the fuck you're using. It might be some shit we don't even know about from the Prometheus world. I don't know. But until then, just keep your eye on things like Hollow9ine.com. It's the word hollow, the number 9, INE.com. You can check out our Facebook page, which is the Hollow9ine Network on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter at Hollow9Cast. It's the same spelling of Hollow9 every place you go. So it's the word hollow, the number 9, INE, and then you add whatever shit you need. So Hollow9Cast, Hollow9Podcast at gmail.com, info at Hollow9.com. There's a whole slew of ways you can interact with us and become part of the adventure. You can check out more of TW's work over on Tangent City, which we are still diligently working on the back end of season 1. And we've also got a lot of other new projects in the works. So
and there's Orchid Grove tomorrow. So
oh my God, the long-awaited next audio drama in the what I call our inner circle of friends. From the very
the hub.
Yeah, the awesome and talented Drew Carson from over at the TFAU. So, lots going on. Keep your ear to the grindstone, as we always say. And until the next meeting, we'll be seeing you. You've been listening to the Hollow9ine Network, bringing you the very best in fan-made media. That's the word hollow, the number 9, INE. Now broadcasting from our new home on the web, Hollow9ine.com, where you can find info on all of our awesome programming as well as the team behind the shows. Leave us your feedback, join in the conversation, and be a part of the action. Find the Hollow9ine Network on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. Rate and review us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts. Email us at info@hollow9.com or at hollow9podcast@gmail.com. Join in the fun. Hollow9.